I have a feeling Godzilla x Kong 3 is going to have the Monsterverse's coolest villain, yet the recent title reveal for Godzilla x Kong. Supernova has the internet abuzz with theories on who the movie's next big bad will be, and if it's who the title implies, then it will have the coolest villain the Monsterverse has seen. The sequel to Godzilla x Kong. The new Empire isn't set to release in theaters on March 26, 2027, but the title reveal was accompanied by teaser footage, albeit brief and uneventful. Godzilla x Kong. Supernova's subtitle points the movie's plot in a very specific direction for those who are familiar with Godzilla's cinematic history. A supernova is typically associated with the death of a star and the creation of a black hole, so including that word in the title conjures the name of a monster who was born in a black hole in the depths of space. Space Godzilla. Space Godzilla has been teased in Monsterverse media before, and the new title makes it seem as though he will be the threat that forces Godzilla and Kong to join forces again. If Space Godzilla is in fact the new villain, then director Grant Sputor has the opportunity to set a new benchmark for badassery for the Monsterverse. Space Godzilla is a clone of Godzilla, to be sure, but the sheer amount of upgrades he has on Godzilla's base creature design make him so much more interesting and powerful. The biggest additions are obviously the gigantic twin crystals jutting out of his shoulders, which act as both conductors and dispersion points for energy attacks. They make him a physically imposing figure, a notion that only gets stronger when you factor in all the intense, dagger-like teeth jutting out of his mouth, along with the five-pointed facial crest. Space Godzilla is capable of not only blasting Godzilla to bits with his various attacks, he has a unique array of telekinetic powers as well, particularly around the space crystals that he's able to grow, manipulate, and fire at enemies. The most die-hard Godzilla fans recognize that the movie in which he originated, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, is not one of Big G's best, but the creature design and intimidation factor for Space Godzilla himself is unquestionably cool. Depending on how closely Sputor and his team stick to the original design, Space Godzilla could be the coolest baddie the Monsterverse has ever seen. Space Godzilla's defining features are his massive shoulder crystals, so it seems unlikely that Grant Sputor would ever get rid of those. However, they were so large and unwieldy in Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla that it was difficult for Space Godzilla to even move his arms, which would be a problem against the more agile Kong and evolved Godzilla. A Monsterverse version of the crystal-covered kaiju could see him keep his shoulder crystals and the accompanying energy attacks, but see them shrink and his arms elongated so that the monster is able to fend off melee attacks better. Ghidorah and Mechagodzilla were both worthy opponents when presented in the Monsterverse, but Space Godzilla deserves to surpass them both based on his history. In Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, it took the assistance of Monsterverse, the Japan Self-Defense Forces mecha defender, to even weaken Space Godzilla to a point where Godzilla could unleash his red spiral heat ray and kill him. Without Monsterverse's assistance, the ultra-powered Space Godzilla would likely have killed Godzilla. Godzilla x Kong. Supernova needs to do the character justice, and making him too much for even an evolved Godzilla to handle is a good start. It's a foregone conclusion that Godzilla and Kong will team up against the movie's big bad, and they'll likely have more support via their alliances with Mothra and Shimo. However, Space Godzilla could kill another Titan, necessitating Kong and Godzilla to call in reinforcements. Mothra barely counts as a death anymore because she is able to be reborn forever, but if Space Godzilla were to kill Shimo, for example, then Godzilla x Kong. Supernova could establish just how dangerous Godzilla's cosmic clone really is.